It's September 5th, 2023. You're listening to the Beer Temple Podcast.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello and welcome to the Beer Temple Podcast. I'm your co-host, Chris Quinn, and I am joined by your other co-host, Mike Cilurzo of Iswas Brewing. What's up, Mike?
Not much. That was like one of your top intros all time.
Yeah, it's one of the top 300 of all time.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of which, episode 300 just so happens.
Wow.
Yeah, right?
We know that for sure, right?
Well, it's the episode that's numbered 300.
Right.
I don't know actually
Never skipped
how
one,
many.
never dropped one.
Yeah, there. Or there might be ones that have been renumbered, and I go back and...
Yeah, we'll have to go look in the archives. Does that include all the Patreon episodes?
Exactly, yes. All those ones that are yet to be released.
No time for shenanigans today.
Yeah,
guys.
we don't have time for too many shenanigans. We're on a timeline, and we've got a star-studded cast here for this episode. So I'm pretty excited, a little nervous. How about you? How you doing?
Yeah,
right.
excited, nervous.
Yeah, good.
Ready.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. We've done this before.
Yeah.
299 times.
Oh, well,
You'll be fine.
Speaking of which, we're going to admit somebody right now who is in true Beer Temple podcast style. We'll just let it get going.
As we let that guest in, we're going to talk about?
We're going to talk about American wild
near
ales.
and dear to our hearts.
Yes, I mean both of ours, but I would think especially.
All of ours.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
It's a show that we've been wanting to do for a while. We wanted to talk about kind of what has happened in the market for these styles, these types of beer. Where they're at, how they got here, and where we see them going. And as I started, asking people to be on the show, it kind of ballooned, and now here we are, and we have a pretty A-list
It's
cast
probably
here.
the best group of people we've ever had on the
Yeah,
show.
I mean, it's certainly the best since we had Tony McGee 2 weeks before he sold the Heineken
And he
told us he would never sell out the Budweiser, which technically he never did.
That's true.
He said, I'd rather gouge my eyes out.
Right, which to be fair, I haven't seen his eyes recently, but...
Yeah, right. But anyway, we digress. We said we weren't going to do shenanigans, and here we are.
There's some shenanigans.
Yeah, it's true.
That's what we do.
People would think they downloaded the wrong podcast if
Right.
they were not.
Talking real fast, not doing any shenanigans.
Right. So let's start introducing the cast, the crew, and we should keep it as we always do. It's going to be a little difficult this time because we always do it in order of seniority. Seniority being how many times you've been on the show, the only seniority we care about. And it's pretty easy to start, and then after that, it's going to be a free-for-all, so we're just going to have to figure it out from there. But the senior member of the panel is Mr. John Laffler. He knows what it's like to be on the show because, like most people who've been on many times, as they're being introduced, they're on their cell phones, which is it's an old standard. He may not even realize it,
call
but
it the Edmar here.
He slid right into the veteran territory.
Is this the second time I've done this?
I think, did I host the first time?
I think it's your third, technically.
third? Okay.
Yeah,
We did one with you, me, Kate, Brankin, and Claudia, I think.
That was
Yes.
a long time ago.
That was a long
Yeah,
time ago.
but how are you?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. Thank you.
Good. Anything new, or should we move on?
Oh, I started sailing again.
Oh.
That's been all I've been talking about for the last
That
couple
is
weeks.
new.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I grew up sailing on the lake, and then we started the brewery, so I didn't have time to do that no more. Now my priorities are different. So
Like when you say sailing, you mean like actual sails on a sailboat, not just like I'm on a boat and I call it sailing, even though it's a motorboat.
Nope.
You're actually sailing in like...
We do a racing circuit on Thursdays and Saturdays.
Wow.
We're on a 26-foot sailboat that sails on Lake Michigan. It's wonderful.
Cool.
That's awesome. Wow. All right. Makes me think of anything I had that was new.
By the way, 1 point out of being a first in our section this year.
Oh, okay. Well, better luck next time. Or congrats.
Out of how many points?
2.
Yeah.
1.5.
There are 3 more races.
So
So you get 1 point per race.
The points are a little bit different, but basically you get points for first, second, third, and then you get to drop a certain number. But
So you have 3 more races?
3 more races, and you
gain
get
a
to drop
point.
6 for the season. So you drop your lowest one. So we're still in contention.
That's great.
Nice.
Congratulations.
I'm very excited.
Well, thanks for coming on, taking time away from all the things that you're doing, all the cool new things that are way cooler than anything I do. So we have John here in, what do we call this? Studio BT.
Sure.
And the rest are via Zoom. So we'll see how this works. We'll go in order that they logged on. How about that? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So up first, we have Mr. Vinnie, I hope I get this right, Cilurzo from Russian River. How are you? First-time guests introduce themselves, so if you could just tell everyone who you are and what you do, I'd appreciate it.
Yep, Vinnie Cilurzo. My wife Natalie and I co-own Russian River Brewing Company in Sonoma County, and we've got a brew pub in Santa Rosa, as well as a big production brewery and second restaurant in Windsor, which is right in Sonoma County as well. And we make about 40,000 barrels a year, so we're not a small operation, but we still have a very strong, funky wild beer operation.
That's all wild ale?
I wish. Yeah. No. Yeah, 40,000's everything.
Yeah, I just visited
and a lot of Pliny, of course.
Right. Yeah,
Heard of it.
I just visited your space several months ago, the new one for the first time. I'd been to the old spot a while back, but yeah, it's impressive. It gave me little feelings of
joy.
Yes, joy, but also of New Glarus. I got as someone from the New Glarus area, I got these little New Glarus feels from it. I don't know why, but it was just very clean, very well put together, very
It has artificial
laid out very well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got that kind of New Glarus, Sierra Nevada, Mills River, Bells, that sort of
a purpose-built place, maybe.
Yeah, all those breweries we've spent a lot of time at checking them out ahead of time to get good ideas.
Yes, and before I forget, shout out to Garrison for hooking up you coming on the show. So thanks to him. Yep. Yeah. Next guest we have Mr. Paul Arney of Ale Apothecary. How are you, Paul? What's up? Good to see you.
I'm doing fine. Yeah, good to see you too. It's been a while.
It has been. I think you were in, if you remember this or not, in the Beer Temple bottle shop, and we started having some nice little conversations, which were a little deeper than your average conversation when somebody just walks in the bottle shop, and I kept that in mind. And then, your name actually popped in my head first when coming up with this topic. So I was like, he seemed like a pretty cool guy when I was talking to him. Maybe we'll say, he'll come on. So thanks for coming on. I also, though, I buried the lead. I said new guests have to say who they are. So now, retroactively, can you say who you are and what you do, Paul?
Yeah, my name is Paul Arney. I own the Ale Apothecary. I started that in 2011. And kind of just as an example here, I also have a 14-foot catamaran built in the 70s. And so you compare that catamaran to John's boat, that's kind of where I feel when we're talking to Mr. Vinnie here. It's like this guy, I'm still brewing in my garage, trying to tip my catamaran over. Anyway, yeah, we do things. We maybe the best way to put it is I have a hard time working with others, so I actually do things by myself.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I was going to jump over to Ron Jeffries, but he
came and
dropped
went
off.
already.
So maybe he'll come back. We'll see.
Apparently, he has a tough time working with others as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe worse than me.
Right. He's also he's zooming in from Hawaii, so that might have something to do with it as well. So
yeah, they don't have Wi-Fi in Hawaii.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
Might be too sunny over there. Too nice.
Too beautiful.
Doesn't want to stay inside.
Yeah, too many better things to do. So we gathered all you guys here together because we wanted to talk about, as I mentioned before, American Wild Ale, and specifically kind of this boom, bust, rise and fall. I don't want to be too morbid, but I just wanted to, to me it has a very interesting and, in recent terms, very unique trajectory that it's taken. And the four of you were kind of there for much, if not all of it. In some cases, maybe even some of the founding steps of it, if they rejoin, especially. But I'm just super excited to kind of get the story, kind of get some source material, so to speak, on this topic. So I say we just go right into it. So starting, I just wanted to ask, when it comes to like sour and wild ale, there's the phone. All right. When it comes to like sour and wild ales, we'll use them kind of together somewhat. I know, John, you guys had a shirt that said wild does not mean sour, and I think we all understand that. The people who are listening understand that, so forgive me in advance if I use them somewhat kind of interchangeably. But when it came to these type of beers,
it's like, let's call them like beers beyond normal brewing,
right?
Sack or things like that, or lager yeast.
I'll just kind of throw a question out there. When did you guys start making these beers on a commercial level? I just want to kind of set a baseline for it, and then we can kind of go into what the climate was like for these beers at that time. So whoever wants to start, go for it.
I guess I'll take it because I'm probably the early one here. I started making what we called, I'll just use the term funky beer, which we use as a broad term. That's sour beer that's got bacteria, or tart beer, that's acidic. And then also it could be a Brett beer that doesn't have any bacteria, which is what I'm drinking now. Anyways, that was in 1999. And that started out with a beer called Temptation. That was a blonde ale aged in Chardonnay barrels, a Belgian blonde ale aged in Chardonnay barrels, initially just with Brett. And then over time, we incorporated some bacteria into it. And then from there, it kind of steamrolled. And in 2004, we brought on Supplication, which is a brown ale in Pinot Noir barrels with Brett Lactopedio. After that was Consecration, dark ale in Cabernet barrels with Currants and Brett Lactopedio. So those were our three baselines, and that happened in 99, 2004, 2006, something like that, for those three.
Got it.
What was your inspiration at the time?
My favorite part of lambic beer has always been Brettanomyces, and I had been to Cantillon when I was, I think like 19 years old. I was on a Eurail pass, and I went to Cantillon. It's amazing. I found it. There's no GPS back then, just with a map. And I, had their beer before, but just fell in love with the process. Then fast forward to my first brewery in Southern California, Blind Pig. We fermented everything in plastic. So I wasn't about to, bring in wild yeast, bacteria, Brett, whatever. And so I had to wait until after Natalie and I moved to Northern California, got the job at Korbel for Russian River Brewery. And a couple years in was 1999 when I first made Temptation.
Wow. So I would say, that's from the beginning.
Early.
I'm trying to think of when I first had some of your sours. I was a little bit lucky. I was on this little island, which was called, well, basically the island was Monk's Cafe in Philadelphia, where I grew up. So I didn't realize how kind of special and isolated those beers were at the time. But I think some of the first American wild ales that I can remember having were, I think, like Consecration and Temptation were two of the first that I ever had. So,
and it was a real treat for us on the West Coast to get Jolly Pumpkin beers from Ron for sure. And maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but I don't even know that Ron and I knew each other back then. On the West Coast, it was Tommy Arthur, who has lost Abbey now, but at the time was at Pizza Port, and he was doing some wild barrel-aged funky beers out in the back of their Solana Beach location. And so Tommy and I would just share everything. And then in time, we both met Ron, and, you start building this fraternity of very few people making those beers back then. Obviously, Peter Buchart from New Belgium at the time, can't have this conversation without mentioning him as well.
Right. Ron, I don't know if you can hear us, but maybe your ears were burning because Vinnie was just was talking about you. I don't know if you picked up any of that, but one, welcome. Thanks for coming on the show. Well, I guess you should probably introduce yourself briefly, and while you're doing it, if you could talk a little bit about when you started making these types of funky beers, as Vinnie called them. That'd be great.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Technical difficulties a little bit. Like I was seeing Vinnie and I was trying to get my headphones hooked up and I couldn't. And I can't figure out my screen to give myself a cool backdrop and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, a little bit about me. I started studying brewing science in the 80s, and in the mid 90s I started brewing for other folks, kind of like John and Vinnie too, brewing for other people. And then in 2004 my wife and I started Jolly Pumpkin as far as I know at the time, the only 100% oak aged naturally soured beer in the US. Everything that we did was soured in oak with naturally occurring bacteria, and wild yeast. We didn't add anything. It just got sour. And Vinnie was starting the same thing, and New Belgium was obviously doing the same thing, and Avery a little bit, but we were 100% into that. And I remember talking to John a lot when he was starting up Off Color, and I've talked to a lot of brewers over the years and given a lot of advice. It sounds weird now, but I helped a lot of people get started. Not Vinnie, because he's way smarter than me, but everybody else.
Got it.
Sorry, I'm just teasing, of course. So and hoping to learn even more as we go forward about it.
So then, paint a picture for me somewhat, like as you guys were starting to make these beers commercially, and this isn't just for Ron and Vinnie. What was the landscape like, and why did you guys feel like you wanted to or needed to or were compelled to make these beers? And for the next generation, that being Paul and John, what was it like to kind of see these beers being made in the U.S.? Because I know from my standpoint, it was few and far between, and I still kind of remembered wondering, just like, who are these people, and like, what are they doing? And it was a long time ago, and my journey in craft beer was at a very different point. But I would love to know, for the people who were making them there, why, and did you have any expectations, and what was the landscape like, and what were you hoping to achieve?
Oh, well, I mean, I can answer that. I mean, I can't answer why my background photo is not the right direction.
Yeah.
But,
oh yeah, it's sideways.
It's funky around. That's why. It's funky.
It's funky, man.
It's wild.
Don't worry, it's audio only.
It's rustic.
and
We'll tell everyone it looks great.
it's actually kind of perfect for my life. It's sideways.
Oh, and sideways.
So I think that, Vinnie can answer this, and John can answer this too, and Paul. Everybody has their own answers. It'll be different. But for me, it came back to I was brewing for other people, and I was doing, all the stuff, the pale ales, the IPAs, the stout. And Joel Shelton came into my brewery with some Cantillon. And he was on tour with his band, one of the Shelton brothers, Joel. And he said, hey, my brother Dan is importing this beer, and I think you might want to try it and see where that goes. And so I said, okay, that's great. I'm brewing right now, but let's open it. Let's have a couple glasses. And he's like, oh no, I can't open it. This is the only bottle I have, and I'm going around the country. Okay. So that was fine. And then, I found a bottle of Cantillon and a couple other sours from Belgium. And I went home, and Lori and I tasted them in the backyard, and we drank them. And they were, very different than anything else anybody was doing in the 90s. And I was like, you know what? If we could, with all apologies to people, there were probably some people that were doing it in the 90s, like New Belgium. And Vinnie said he started doing sours in the 90s. But I was like, if we could just do this, this would be okay. Well, he said, well, why don't you? And I looked at her, and I said, are you serious? And she said, yeah, let's just do that. So when we went to open Jolly Pumpkin, that's when we decided to be 100% oak-aged, naturally soured beer. And what were our expectations? Our expectations were that it's completely different flavors than most people are used to, so it's going to be super popular, and we'll just at least sell enough beer to break even. What ended up happening was we got a lot of people calling us and bar owners calling us and saying, hey, your beer is infected. Your beer is bad. You need to take it back. And I'm like, well, we thank you. I appreciate that. And then I would do the explanation on the naturally sour thing and the lactobacillus and the Brettanomyces and things like that. And they're like, oh, well, we thought you made a pumpkin beer. Like, okay. Maybe the name wasn't so great, but yeah, it was really tough at first, and so we just kind of slogged through it and kept doing what we did, and buying more wood till now we have probably 3,000 barrels of beer in oak right now. It's not smart. I wouldn't recommend it for anybody, but what I do.
Fair enough.
That's
Yeah.
very concise.
Yeah.
I'll just say that, again, for me, it started with Cantillon as the first inspiration, then Dre Fontana shortly thereafter. I talked about earlier not being able to ferment in plastic at my first brewery. So by the time I got to a brewery that I could do this, it wasn't our sole, beer that we were going to survive on. So, I mean, I'm impressed by any brewery that can do this. It's always just been a part of our portfolio, but really it was just because I loved those flavors, the styles, the challenge. I do have a winemaking background as well, so it's a bit like being a winemaker. Expectations, we didn't have any, but I remember when we first made the first batch of Temptation, took it out to deliver. I think we actually brewed it in 98 and then released it in 99, or maybe it was 2000, whatever it was. And like nobody would buy it. the only beer bar that I could sell it to was the Tornado in San Francisco, and not even the little deli at Corbel, where the brewery was, the champagne cellar that started Russian River. Like, we didn't even sell it there.
Ouch.
We sold everything that we made. Granted, it wasn't a lot, but still, Dave bought it all. And all these other, beer bars that were in the area that were well known locally, Barclays, Ben and Nick's, the Bistro, a lot of them are still there. Like, they wouldn't even touch the wild funky beer. So it was really hard. So I know exactly what Ron was talking about. And I don't know, Paul, do you distribute a little bit, Paul, don't you? Or do you sell everything out of your spot?
Oh no. Yeah. We distribute, for sure. And, I greatly appreciate the path leading that you and Ron did. It was a little easier when I started my brewery. People at least knew kind of, at least a framework of what was going on. But I guess the reason that I started brewing this stuff, it wasn't to necessarily emulate other beers. It was to try to reduce brewing down to this completely natural process, and plus because, we've got to treat our own wastewater and all that, didn't want to be using chemicals, and, so steam and microflora became my friends, But I guess, I got my start with the Dissident when I was working at Deschutes, and, that was like, Rodenbach and Laffler were kind of the two ones that I remember really kind of opening my mind to what these beers could be. And, it's been very interesting, right? It's very, I guess my question for you guys, when you started out, was this like when you were breaking it to the Tornado, were they taking the beers because they were familiar with some of these other beers you're talking about, or was it just like they knew you and they're like, well, shoot, dude, it's Vinnie, so we'll take the beer?
Yeah, they didn't know who I was, and they were already selling all the beers that the Shelton brothers were bringing in, specifically Cantillon, so they knew it, and they would even take draft Cantillon if they could get it at the time, and bottles of Dre Fontano, whatever else Shelton was selling, which there really wasn't that many, funky wild beers from Belgium. There's probably a few more, but yeah, so they were, they knew it, and they were really interested to see a local, Bay Area-ish brewery coming forward with these beers. And also they thankfully didn't taste like vinegar either, they had a nice flavor, and I knew I didn't have like there. I mean, if you think about it now, like there's books on these things, there's podcasts, there's websites, there's all kinds of stuff that really didn't exist back then when Ron and Tommy and back then, if you asked Peter Buchart something, he would give you like a nibble of information, and you would have to figure it out. And, but when I think back to some of the early players, like, Ron at Jolly Pumpkin and what we did, and Tommy at Pizza Port and Peter Buchart, we each did something totally different. And moving forward, the industry, or this segment of our industry, kind of got crowded. I think too crowded at one point, but it was neat to see each of us doing our own thing. And then, eventually we would bounce ideas off each other, but no one really stole ideas. We just borrowed techniques. And I think that's my favorite thing about these beers, is that they're yeast driven. And a lot of times they're natural yeast driven, and you have no control, but they're also very process driven, whereas like when we make IPA, it's like very rigid on what we do. And I love the free-flowing nature of these beers.
So I very much agree with that, because I
just want to echo what Vinnie just said, is that when I started, there weren't any books on what to do or how to do anything, and then as he said, we would bounce ideas off each other and maybe refine processes, and it is a very process intensive, but as he said, also it's wild yeast, it's bacteria, it's going to do what it's going to do, but you have to create like the world that it lives in, and then you can kind of get to where you want to go. but I think that's great. And yeah, it's too bad Tommy couldn't be on the show too, because he's one of the guys that was doing it back then as well, just like Vinnie said. But yeah, it was really interesting because there were no resources when we started. And as he said about Peter, he's so cryptic. He'd be like, yeah, well, what do you think? And I'm like, Peter, I'm asking you a question. And he's like, interesting. It's just like, okay, I'll figure it out, I guess, myself. And, it worked out okay, I guess. So,
John, what were you going to say?
I got a question for something that Ron said there kind of made me think a little bit. Like, for you two guys, well, maybe for all you guys that are doing this, how long did it take you until you got to a point where you were like feeling pretty good about your process and your products? Like, it's like for me, like seriously, like it's really been only in the last year or two where I feel like I kind of understand what I'm doing finally. Like, I think it has to do a lot with the environment I'm in and our unique process and all that. But just curious on like how long it took you guys to feel comfortable, because, you wouldn't stay in here if you're just like, if everything was confusing all the time, anyway, what do you guys think about that?
About 10 years for me. Seriously, like we were doing it first at Corbel, and then we moved, Natalie and I took the brewery over, and then we started doing it at our Santa Rosa location, which most people know Russian River by. And then we built a production brewery to do more of this and more of other beers. And yeah, we finally got our funky beer legs under us after about 10 years. The beers coming out before them were great, but I think we needed some repetition to have muscle memory and then just see subsequent batches be good. Like the very first batch of Supplication we put out, and we were already shipping a very small amount of beer to Philly, mainly to sell at Monk's Cafe. And Tom Peters called it like one of the top 5 beers he's ever had, my favorite beer bar in America, and, super well respected, publican for funky beer, for Belgian, American, whatever. And like, he's saying this and we're like, well, geez, now we have to recreate it. And like you were saying, Paul, like, how do I recreate, and the second batch wasn't as good. We knew exactly what we did on the first batch, but but I think that's what's so cool about these beers. I remember back in 2009 or 10, UC Davis had a class on Brettanomyces for winemakers, but of course the emphasis is how to get rid of Brett.
Yeah.
And I went to it with our then lab production manager, and there's only 2 other people there other than Mike and I that were there that were for Brett, that were Brett positive. Chris White was there. He wanted to know. And then there was one winemaker who I know, Chris Howell from Kane, who has a little bit of Brett in his wine. But the one thing I learned, and it kind of goes back to the uncertainty of the beers, is that so regular yeast, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, always has 16 chromosomes, but Brettanomyces has a moving number between roughly 4 and 9 chromosomes, and it can be different. And so, and that was my big takeaway from this, was that even if you're buying Brett off the shelf and you're inoculating it and you're not even going wild, spontaneous, you still may get that variability where one time it tastes like you walked into the Goodyear tire shop, and the next time it's beautiful jasmine and floral and so on and so forth. So,
John, was something you wanted to say?
I would definitely agree with that. I mean, he said 10 years, and I was like, I was thinking 15, because we moved at about 10 years to a new brewery and started adding a bunch of really giant fooders, and Laffler's saying no. So he's like, what Laffler's saying no about. But I would agree with, like, if you, 10 to 15 years, and then you never, to echo on what Vinnie is talking about, like, you never dial it in. There's no dialing it in. It's not like a regular beer yeast, and that's what we do is we've developed this blending program where we do tastings, we do blendings, and that's how you get consistency. And like he said, is one day you walk into the Goodyear tire shop and you're like, yep, not using that one in this beer. And then the other day, it's beautiful, it's fruity, it's tropical, and then you can maybe blend it out. But it's the thing that I've enjoyed most about the wild beer process is that it's just this never-ending change. I mean, if every day is a different day, every blend is a different day, every beer is a different day, and then you always have to be aware of your barrels or your fruiters and what's going on in them, and being like, okay, these barrels aren't producing right. What do we do? Can we fix these barrels, or are they just we're turning them into ornaments? Because we do that. We'll cut them up and put them as decorations in our pubs and things if they just keep producing bad beer. So if Paul, you've dialed it in a year, that's admirable, because
I said last year, so it's been like 12.
So you're right on target. You're right on target. Yeah. Yeah.
Right in that 15-year thing. It just takes a while, and then you just have to learn what you're looking for, and then you also have to accept when things don't work right, and you're like, you know what, this beer just isn't right. I'm not going to sell it.
Yeah, I think there was, I can't remember where I read it, in one of the books that on funky beer, someone had a quote that, like, at some point you do need to dump some beer, and that's something that it can be very costly if you're a small upstart on a shoestring. I mean, I know a lot of breweries that were making funky beer and they wouldn't dump anything, and I just, you'll always dump beer if you're because you're kind of living on the edge sometimes. And but you also learn, especially if you're buying Brett, you find the yeast source, supplier that has the Brett that you like, because Brettanomyces bruxellensis is going to be different from all the different vendors, but you find the one that works for you, and you figure out your process. And my process may not work for Paul or Ron or anyone, but it's just takes time. And you think about someone like Jean Van Roy at Cantillon, who's grew up doing this, and I talked to him about blending, and he still says he's learning, and he's done it his whole life, and we don't get to do it. At least I don't get to do it as much as I would love to, just because of how the market is.
Let me ask then, hold on one second, Ron. I have a question that it kind of segues into this. Is I hear you all talking about how it was so much discovery. It took so long to kind of even just, I was going to say master it, but I think, Paul, what you're saying is even to maybe feel comfortable or to know what you're doing. I'm curious what it was. Why did this style that is so intricate or difficult or unknowable to so many people, did it take off so much? I mean, relative. I don't think it was ever, going to do IPA numbers, but I don't know what years, like 2010 to 2015, 2017, something like that. It really kind of felt like it was on everyone's mind. I remember going to see CBC one year, and I saw like multiple cool ships on the expo room, like they were selling, and I was like, "Wow, this is really happening." It's crazy. Is there any thoughts as to why these beers in particular just seem to capture so many different brewers? I don't know, in whatever way, and it just all of a sudden it went from no information, a few people doing it, everyone trying to figure out their own way, to, well, everyone's going to have a wild program, or
I don't know if
like
the information or everyone knowing what they're doing
Okay.
aligns with people trying to sell you cool ships. But yeah,
Okay.
why do you think in that era it like popped off? People, like, everyone wanted to do it so heavily. Anyone have any guesses?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for me, I'll just speak for myself and the brewers that I know. I mean, to me, the essence of these beers is like at the core of our craft, right? I mean, it's the reason that we are talking about mixed culture beers is because it reaches back into history, and it connects us in a way to this product that it's hard to feel when you're brewing on a traditional stainless steel brew system. So I like, at least for my brewing friends, it's like, it seems like that's the thing. It's like this celebration of our craft. It's a way to learn more about the brewing process and these ingredients that go in there, the microflora and stuff. But I think you couple that with the fact that, these products were being priced at a rate that got people with money's attention, and the way that it kind of snowballed with hype beers and ratings, and it kind of turned into this like advanced baseball card trading program thing. And I think it fed something that humans like to do, this kind of gambling, risky collecting, whatever all that stuff is, wound up in a nice little package.
Rating, people like to rate and rank as well as
Yeah.
any sort of clickbait will tell you,
You won't believe the number 7 American
Right.
Pale Ale.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I had never thought about that. I guess it was coming about the same time that some of these online communities were starting to really gel for the first time as well. And in some cases, the internet was just maturing a little bit more and finding these spaces for these types of enthusiasts.
And they stood out in that world, right, where they were, obviously something different, packaged differently. There was usually stories attached to them in the way that there weren't necessarily for IPA. So that might be part of it, that there were these like, oh, this is unique and rare, and maybe that's going to have value in someday. And it was maybe there's speculation amongst the Stratomatic beer players.
Well, let me ask then. I mean, do you think that? I mean, you said two things that I guess can both be right, Paul, but they're kind of somewhat opposed. It's people trying to find like the art of brewing, but then also people, trying to get the special baseball card that has the, special foil seal on it. And it's a one of, one and stuff like that. So it seems like those things don't really work together. Right? Yeah. Right.
No, but that special card isn't really about baseball. It's not.
Right.
It's for the value of that thing. And I think that's the difference is like, for me, the understanding with these brewers and the people who appreciate fermentation and the flavors that it can bring is one thing. And then we have this, other thing that's happening at the same time that really spiraled. It was really crazy to watch and see it kind of mushroom into this, because then you also have people who are, we'd have customers coming in and the knowledge that they would like to drop about other breweries and what they're doing, it gave them a like they felt like they're part of it. It was really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, do you think that? Do you think that is a good thing or a bad thing for this style of beer? Like that quick ascent, kind of like a lot of proliferation of.
I think I was not, personally, I was, the hype thing was a big turnoff for me, because it didn't seem like the people that were most enthusiastic about that kind of thing weren't, could have cared less about how all the intention and the reasons that I was doing things. None of those really mattered. It was like whether or not this beer was being rated at a certain level or somebody knew about it or whatever. It wasn't, I think it'd be different if we were being celebrated for, kind of like what Vinnie was talking, all these different ways that people were doing things and the creativity and this art that we were doing. But I think that's where I kind of, I was making this, this comparison, right? So like we've got this bakery across the street, and they make great artisan bread, right? And I mean, you can see it. You look at the bread and you're like, that is not Dave's Killer Bread, right? You can just see it. Where with the beer world, we've got things in packages, or draft handles, or things in bottles, and it's a lot harder to communicate what goes into the product, and I think that's where I feel we lost a little bit with this, where things got blown up. Is like, me personally, I feel like there's a lot of things about my brewery and the story that I wanted to tell that just didn't translate into that world.
Mm-hmm. John, thinking back to when Off Color opened, what was that, like 2012, 20?
We opened in, well, I should probably know this off the top of my head.
It's something like that.
It's around 2012.
Yeah. It's interesting because prior to that, you had a large, probably one of the largest wild programs that you were heading up at Goose Island, I would imagine, and opening up a place like Off Color. What was your feeling about the wild, sour, funky? We'll call it funky. I like that term, Vinnie. It kind of nice catch-all. What was your feeling about what the market was like? Were you worried at all about what the market could bear, and if Off Color was going to be able to be a part of it? I don't know. I'm just very interested to get into your mind as you were starting it up.
Yeah. So we started up in 2013. So from 2010 or so, I was at GI. And we had, a fair amount of barrels, doing acidic beers. There was definitely a growing market at that point. That was going into the heyday, I think, as we were all talking about, of where these sort of acidic beers were going. And we were doing long-term barrel age storage and acidification in barrel. And people just wanted acidity. And that was great. It was wonderful. There was, obviously we were standing on the steps of what these other guys were doing. And also, we had abilities to ask them questions, and you could go to CBC and see. I remember seeing Vinnie do a talk and just put a fucking nail in the barrel. It's so much easier than pulling it out of the top. It's such a simple thing, and yet that little practical step, was one of those stepping stones for the industry as a whole.
All right, John. I have a Martha Stewart turkey based beer that works really well.
Well, did you do a talk at CBC about it?
No, I did not.
No, so before we went to the CBC talk at GI, we were using sterile pipettes to pull out the top of them. And then if, the beer had fallen below the level we could get a pipette in, we were like, well, what do we do now? I guess you turn the barrel, but within the stack, it's difficult. And it's goes this thing, and it's oh, can we just do that? Also, then our safety guys at GI were like, no, because when we pressurize them, the nail's going to shoot out and go across. It's it's not. But they did not like us drilling into the barrels at that point. But anyways,
I love it.
Yeah, long story short, there's this growing interest in acidified beer. And one of the reasons, after I left Goose and starting off our own place is people wanted acidified beers, and we were pretty early in doing quick souring. So, had a long history of doing, not as long as other people here, but a long history of doing long-term barrel acidification. And it's well, if people just want acidic beers, we can do that in a 2 to 3 time period easily. This is before kettle souring, A, became a thing, and then B, became a dirty word. And it's so we started up, and, we started doing, Berliner Weisses and Goza and, those sorts of beers, in addition to, traditional long-term barrel-aged wild beers. And we were very clear about what those were and how they were acidified differently, and having those be 2 separate product lines. I think one of the reasons why American wild beers failed, I think is a strong word, but really fell out of favor and really honestly just fucked it up, is it in our nomenclature and how we define these beers, how we talk about these beers. Because a couple of years after we started doing that, it became very popular. And then all of a sudden, it's people just start calling them sour beers, which is one of the reasons why I personally have I feel strongly about using that word. Because as soon as we started talking about them as sour beers versus as wild beers or lactobacillus fermented beers, yada yada, then Americans being Americans, the largest and loudest voice is going to win. So the most acidic beers, the most sour beer is the best sour beer. Like, well, that's, if we're looking at these wild beers of poetry, that's not true. You're not the best poet.
The most words is the best poem.
Right. But it is very interesting because that was such a difficult conversation to have, even with fairly knowledgeable people. Because
poem is a haiku that doesn't have the most words, and I agree with John on what he's saying about all that stuff. But I think that what we're all trying to get down to is simplicity. I mean, we're not pitching cultures. We're just putting it in oak. We're letting it age. We're blending it. Blending is not simple at all. But yeah, I mean, the best poem is not the one with the most words. Haikus are beautiful. So
yes. No, I think he was being facetious.
Beowulf.
Yeah, but it was confusing. It was confusing to people, what sour was. And we have a pretty sophisticated clientele overall at the bottle shop here at the Beer Temple. And it was difficult for them to communicate what they were looking for. And eventually we started saying things like, so you want a sour beer? It's like, are you looking for a 6-pack sour or like a single bottle sour? And they'd be like, I want something in a single bottle. It's like, okay, let's go over here. Some lambics, here's some Jolly Pump, stuff like that versus a quick sour.
Yeah, something more elegant,
right,
and nuanced and sophisticated versus like, oh, you just want some tartness? Sure, we can do that in 2 weeks, no problem.
Right.
Well, articulating,
but it's difficult. It's difficult to communicate that easily.
The nomenclature is very important.
Yeah,
I think we messed up.
And meanwhile, right? Meanwhile, in the wine world, which of course, so many people have issues with that. They had natural wine, which they can argue about till the cows come home. But I was always envious because it was like, regardless of all the turmoil that it's causing in that industry about who thinks what is what, it sure gave the consumer a word that they could grab onto, that wasn't like, because I agree with John, the sour word is like, my wife she's had to pull my teeth out to get me to put that word on our website so the search engines can pick it up. It's like, so I just found that interesting because the wine one is like, the natural wine, it sounds intriguing. It sounds nice, and we got
thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about beer too. It was like with Vinnie's background, I'd really love to hear his opinion on like, should we stop calling it wild and sour and just start calling it natural? Like especially in my case, where we're just using natural bacteria to ferment it, like why call it wild or sour? Maybe it should be natural. And then just like with wine, maybe it'll be a good thing.
Yeah.
What do you think, Vinnie?
Yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword because some consumers, that's what they're going to associate it with. And, it's the people that come back and say your beer's contaminated, it's sour, it's gone wrong. And it's like, no, that's not the case. It's supposed to be this way. Oh, well, the label didn't say that. And we've gone back and forth with our labels and how do you label it? And, but natural wine has been such a catch-all for the wine industry, but the wine industry's always done probably a better job at, selling themselves with, as estate bottle, vineyard designate, so on and so forth. And, we say wild yeast, they say native yeast, it's just sounds a little more elegant. And so I think it did start out with us and in the beer industry, not having the right, nomenclature. And, if it was natural beer over sour, I would take natural beer like natural wine as a descriptor, as a catch-all. I guess sometimes someone's got to start the movement in that direction, but I also look back to those heady years in the 2010 to say 15, when it seemed like everybody was creating a funky beer program, and there was so much bad beer out there in this category that was just overly sour. And I mean, I remember going to a brewery, a very well-known brewery once, and having their wild beer, and it just tasted like I was drinking balsamic vinegar. I mean, it was crazy how bad it was. And around this time, the CBC was in San Francisco. This is 2009, so a little bit before, but we decided to have this sour beer symposium at our then production brewery. And all you had to do was bring a couple bottles of your own funky beer or one that inspired you. And then we actually had Jean Van Roy was there, and then Yvonne de Bates was there he was already had De La Seine, but he's, knows a lot about making these beers. I had a barrel person there over from Barrel Builders. And then we just had this very casual gathering. And the idea was to try to get all these like-minded people together to drink each other's beer, share information, and hopefully help those that were just starting or maybe weren't making the best stuff and get better. And I don't know if it worked or not, but for a long time
I was there, and it was wonderful. Thank you.
That was a great event. Yeah. So we hit this point in the industry where everyone and their brother and sister decided to have a funky wild beer program, and there was a lot of bad beer coming out, unfortunately. And I think that also has, quick sours to a degree has probably shifted some people that just want something a little bit tart and acidic compared to something that's more in depth like all of us make. But, also I think a lot of people got turned off. I don't know why it is, but if someone has a bad pale ale, it's not going to turn them off to buying pale ale next time. But if they have a bad wild beer that tastes like balsamic vinegar, somehow it just sends them in a direction, and they'll probably won't come back to the to the style, or
maybe
it's going to take
ale,
a long time.
The pale ale maybe it didn't cost them $20 either. It was like,
Chris, they have those now.
They do have those now.
Yeah, sorry, they keep falling off. But exactly, with the bad sour beer versus the bad pale ale, and then I forget the year, but Jean Roy was down in St. Petersburg at one of the Shelton Brothers festivals. So going to give another Shelton Brothers shout out, because they've been amazing for what we do and the beers they imported. And so it was a blend where he had a number of different Cantillon beers, and he was going to create a blend. And I'm like, okay, I do this. And it was like a long line. And I'm like, I don't need to wait in line. And Shane Brown's like, come on, just come in. I'm like, okay, but I don't want to take anyone's place. So I'm just going to sit by the window. And we blended beer together. I tasted his beer. I tasted my beer. And I was like, fuck. I need to learn a lot. This was not that long ago. Pre-COVID, but not that long ago, and just tasting what he does and what I do, and I'm like, okay. And then so I did it, because it's me. I did a second blend and a third blend, and they still weren't as good. like, okay, I have a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm. At the same time that wild, funky, natural beers were growing, like craft beer wasn't what it was now. Like it wasn't mainstream like it is now. And so you had a lot of people buying these beers, but I don't think they were drinking them as fast as they were buying them. And so their cellar was getting full, and they were saving it for a special occasion. It's almost like the sparkling wine champagne syndrome. You only drink it on New Year's or for special occasion. And I still think there's probably, we get people into the brewery all the time, and they walk in to our, if they're taking the tour and they see the barrel room, and they go, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I think I have, 24 bottles of your funky beer stashed away, and they're not they're not drinking it.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe a part of it as well. The
Pipe fill,
slowdown,
as
the
they
funky
say.
beer.
Yeah.
So it's not that like people aren't buying these beers. Like we're still selling plenty of them, and remarkably, it's doing amazing on draft and distribution. But the bottles, they're not selling as fast as they once did, and we've just had to adjust, and it is what it is. That's what business is.
How do you thread that needle of being able to charge enough to make these beers make economic sense, but not make them so precious that people save them for these special occasions exclusively? Like, I don't know. I don't have an answer, but do you guys do you think about that, or do you have any
Oh
thoughts?
yeah, all the time. I mean, sorry, Vinnie, I don't mean to interrupt or John, but yeah, we price everything, based on margin and what we want. And I want to echo what Vinnie said. It's like a lot of people capture these beers and then they put them in their cellars and
Pokemon style.
Exactly. And this is another lesson from Gene Roy that I learned is like when we release a beer, it's for you to drink now. You can put it in the cellar if you want. It might get better, it might get worse, but like we're selling it for now. And as far as how do we price them, it's you just got to make your sorry, Paul, you talked about the capitalism thing, but you got to make your margin. Then you say, okay, it costs me this much to make this beer. I need to make this much to pay my electrical bill and my other utility bills and things like that. And you just got to price it that way. And then when people say they hold on to them for 10 years, and I mean, I get those emails all the time. And someone's like, hey, we're drinking this beer. It's 10 years old. I'm like, mostly they say it's great, but I'm like, yeah, it was probably better 9 years ago or whenever you bought it.
9.5 years ago.
So, but I mean, I'm not trying to be whatever negative about people who like to sell beers, but I'm just sort of echoing Vinnie's comment of like, these beers they're not fine cognac, they're not fine whiskeys. Like we release them when we feel they're ready to be drunk, drink, whatever.
You age them the appropriate amount of time.
We age them for the appropriate amount of time. So if they're on the shelf, drink them now, and then buy another one. And if you want to put it in your garage or whatever, that's your business. Mm-hmm. But really, don't hoard them. Just drink them and drink more. I don't mean drink more like in a bad way. I mean like buy more beer. I think that all of us could use people to buy more sour beers or wild beers or natural beers, whatever we want to call them. But it's just like if you just buy it and put it in your basement. Okay,
yeah. It's interesting. I'm thinking.
Like, are you still living with your mom, and that's why you put it in the basement? I don't know.
Well, that's where my room is, so I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, right.
Why do you hate moms, Ron?
Yeah.
Why do you hate my mom?
We could have a conversation about that, but that's fine. But what I just meant was just like the beer that we release is ready to be enjoyed when we release it. I don't release a beer unless I feel this is great. We do all bottle conditioning, and so we try all of them. So we'll wait weeks or months before we release a beer after it's in the package, after we blended it, after it's been in the foeder or the barrels for a year or whatever. So when I release it, I'm like, this beer is good. You should try it right now. Mm-hmm. If you want to put it in your basement for a year or 2 or 10, that's your business, but it's pretty good right now.
Yeah.
I think we're doing pretty okay.
It's interesting. I mean, with going back to some of this pale ale versus sour analogy, I mean, in addition to the cost, one of the things that was communicated very early on is drink this stuff fresh, drink it fresh, don't cellar it. It is not going to get better. It will get worse. And that isn't necessarily the case, or definitely on a different timeline with funky beers. And Paul, I wonder if this...
no, I completely disagree.
Okay.
I completely disagree. That's what I was just saying, is that what we do as a brewery is we age this, we blend it, we package it, we condition it in the package. And so when we send it out to retail, it's great. I mean, you can age it if you want, but it's every beer gets bad eventually. I mean,
Yeah.
oxygen, sunlight, all that stuff is bad for beer time. So with these aged beers, and you know, John, Paul, and Vinnie might disagree with me, but we age beers a lot, and we can, as I was just saying, condition them in the brewery a lot after packaging. So when we send them out for sale, this is when you should buy this right now. If you want to put it in your basement, that's your business, but it may get better, it may get worse. But right now, this beer is tasting awesome.
Sure. I think what I was saying was the perception of
and what a lot of other breweries were saying.
Right,
right?
exactly.
Like I remember Goose Island had outrages for like up to 5 years on some. Like maybe that was just the bourbon barrel stuff.
Those on stouts.
Yeah.
Just on stouts.
But yeah, what you were kind of mentioning earlier, Paul, with this, I don't know if this was your term or if not, I'll take it. But the kind of the hype element to it, you know, a lot of these beers were so coveted that they were hard to get. And maybe you had to stand in a long line to get some of these beers, or maybe if you saw it on the shelf, you better snatch it up right now. In the case of like stuff like Cantillon and stuff like, yeah, you better know the buyer. And you then didn't want, you felt like you needed to wait for a special moment. You're almost wasting it in that person's mind if you just opened it up because you wanted to watch it, you know, along with football on Sunday or something like this. And, you know, your basement only has so much room, or at some point everybody starts to realize I only have this many special occasions realistically that I'm going to go through. And and it prevents you from buying the new stuff that comes out because you're like, man, I've got 24 of these in my cellar already and I should be drinking those. And I don't know if that had and on top of it, then you had all these new breweries coming onto the scene who were, you know, putting in a wild program, and not just that, they were saying that some of their wild beer, some of their funky beer, was their most special beer. So everyone was kind of pushing this narrative, or a lot of people were. I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of people were pushing this narrative that like these are special. Get ours. We put so much attention into this. You should care about our wild, funky beers. And I'm guessing it. I mean, I'm not guessing. I know at the Beer Temple, the shelves started getting really crowded with a lot of these premium, not quick sour, funky beers, and it happened rapidly. It happened quick. It happened over the course of like a year or two.
Did you see it? Did you see it drop off quickly? In let's say in the last few years, 2 years, 3 years?
I'd say it was a little more than that, but it was it happened. It happened rapidly, and it happened from it was like diametrically opposed with, I think, more hype, like what you were saying, Paul, than with actual quality, I would say.
So I saw it happen with the rise of hazy IPAs. Just took all that market share. Like you're the retailer.
Yeah.
But I just saw people.
No, I agree. I think, I mean, and I think that's a really interesting point too. Like, because I mean, beer is so trendy anyway, right? I mean, things come and go, and I think just to see this happen with this particular thing, you know, that I think on the surface is so niche, right? I mean, it's like it's such a particular. It's going to take a particular person. They're not for everybody. Like they're just not. And I think for a while there, maybe we all thought it was for everyone, or everybody wanted to play the game. And we only had so many people that had, 1,500 bottles in their cellar. And then they got to the point of like, I can't join your ale club anymore because I've got too much beer. You know what I mean? It was a really, it's kind of curious to think like how many people actually supported that. Like if you could take volume based on how many people were actually supporting it and compare that to say other types of, was it just a few small, just a few of these collectors, speaking generally, that were just purchasing a crap ton of beer?
Yeah.
And as craft grew, it was being sold outside of the brewery more, and it's in the brewery where you can tell the story of this style of beer. I mean, Paul, do you? I might be wrong, but are all of your primary fermentations in the open barrels?
We have a couple open top fooders.
Or some are, yeah.
And then, some of them we do spontaneous, and then they start fermentation in barrels.
Yeah. I mean, that's just like this beautiful story of fermentation or a coolship, and as you start to these things become more mainstream, and random regional brewery starts making them, there really isn't much of a story behind it anymore either.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You end up getting a lot of acidity.
I think that it's a little bit about packaging and marketing. I mean, we've all been through the can revolution that started, and so I think people aren't really that interested in 750 ml bottles. Ours fell off a cliff, like it sounds like everyone's did.
Yep.
I just think it's a packaging and a marketing thing, and then when you have all the new breweries with all the labels that are kind of cartoony, where you can't, with all due respect to the people who do that sort of stuff. Not you, John. I like your labels.
You're one of the good ones.
We both have mouses on our labels. But, some of the stuff where you can't even see what the beer really is or where it's from or anything. I mean, I think it's just a consumer information thing. That, like, if people know what they're buying, I think people are going to be fine. But if they don't know, they're not going to buy it. And then also there was a huge consumer shift from the 750 ml bottles to cans. And then our sales, until we got back into cans, just literally fell off a cliff. Like it seemed like one day we were selling fine, and the next day nobody wanted our bottles. So I don't necessarily know if it's a price point or a consumer message or whatever else you guys are talking about, but what I do know is the consumer is looking for a package and they're looking for information. And I think that if we can provide, it sounds dumb, I'm sorry, but I've been putting sour beer and we test the acidity and the can liners and all that stuff to make sure it's all working out well. But I've been putting sour beer in cans for a couple of years, and it sells way better. But the 750 mLs just dropped off a cliff. So, we all have to keep the lights on and pay our employees. So we have to do what the consumer wants. I know as an artist, like you were saying, Paul, and maybe one of the email chains, as an artist, I know what I want to do. But I also know as a business owner what I need to do as well. And sometimes they're just diametrically opposed, and I'm not quite sure how to make that work out other than keep the lights on and pay my employees.
I don't know what the answer is.
Part of being an entrepreneur.
We switched to
totally.
250 ml. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to address that artist comment, I think really like all I was getting at in that email is like, I think, this wild beer ascent and fall, grand fall is really happening in the larger brewing world right now as well. I mean, it's like, it's not just, the wild beer is definitely something we can look at and talk about because it's fairly dramatic, but it's across the board, a lot of the breweries in town are down, and the ones that aren't, it's really interesting to talk to them about why this and why that. But I guess the thing that I still can't get my mind around is just this, in the history of the craft beer, right? There's just been so many times that breweries grow, and then they, and then they bust, and then they grow, and then they bust, and I just don't quite understand why sometimes there's just not this place where people can be happy with without just going so big and, flooding the market with so much of their own beer when there's, I think that's, just to address that artistic comment, that's really all I was getting is I just don't understand, I think one of the most fascinating things for me in this business has been to realize how hard it is to not grow, right? Like
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And I have not, maybe at this place, I'm going to find that, because, I'm still part of Jolly Pumpkin. I have this new brewery in Hawaii, Gila Brewing Company, and I'm trying to find that balance of not growing too much and just being profitable. And I have friends that have really struck it, like Gabe from Anchorage Brewing Company and Henry from Monkish. There are a lot of guys that, and Todd from Fonta Flora that have, I wouldn't, whatever. I talked to them a lot as they were opening their companies, and I hope that I help them get to that balance. But yeah, there definitely is that balance of you got to get to that profitability point, and then you just got to say, is this okay for me? Am I taking care of my family? Am I taking care of my people? Obviously, a lot of people, it's, as you said in your email, it's capitalism. A lot of people just want to grow. But, as I wrote back, it's like, I'm way past that. I don't want to grow. I just want to be taking care of my family and my people and have that right balance of profitability with sales, and I don't need to grow any more than that. I've done it before. It's just a headache.
How much of this this wild ale surge back in the early days do you think was speculation from people who maybe weren't necessarily bought into what the idea, I guess I heard of some breweries during those times where it was like, the owners or the board wants to get a sour program going so they can compete with, Russian River and stuff, because they see like, wow, they're selling these bottles for, 20 some bucks and whatever. And it's like, how much of that element do you guys think was involved in this?
I will say those people were probably also saying, and make me a Pliny while you're at it as well.
Well, I know of some breweries.
I have Vinnie's recipe, so I could do it, but I don't.
I choose not to.
But yeah,
so
I don't really think so. I mean, maybe there were some breweries that wanted to make a sour program, but I think that everybody pretty soon realized that it's really specialized and it's not a big moneymaker. So I think it's mostly the small breweries that kept making sour beer, and as I think all of us have said, Vinnie, Paul, and John said that there has been a lot of really bad sour beer put out, and it's mostly from small sour breweries. Like the bigger breweries, they're doing great beer. That's fine. It's a really small percentage of their sales, and they know that. I mean, they have salespeople, they have accountants. They know what their sales are. But so I don't think so.
I would add that one of the things that have come out of the downturn of funky beer is that a lot of the breweries that weren't making great quality, funky wild beer aren't making it anymore. And there are some good ones that unfortunately have sold or, gone under, moved on, folded their funky program. But there was a lot of really bad wild, funky, sour, whatever you want to call it. And it's good to have a lot of those players not in the game anymore. Those are like really harsh words because that's someone's business. But right. If you're not making like the highest quality and product, no matter what it is, it could be chocolate, olive oil, beer, wine, whatever, like you shouldn't be doing it. And so in a way, I'm just, I think for us, we're kind of buying our time. We have a program that's running. Are we selling as much as we thought we would have after building our, dream brewery in Windsor? No, but, we also, took some of our funky space and repurposed it for other stuff. And we still have an amazing funky program and have everything we need to operate it. But, in time, I hope consumers that maybe got put off by these beers will come back and try them and come back in, whether it's my beer or anyone's.
So, Vinnie, I just want to make sure. I know we're running out of time for you, so I wanted to make sure we got to one of these questions that you were interested, and maybe it has a lot to do with what you were just talking about. But we had been talking earlier about any unintended consequences from this boom bust cycle, and you were interested in
yeah, and I think that was an unintended consequence of the bust part of it, is that, a lot of breweries stopped making them. I do know of one brewery where ownership, board of directors said, this is a big regional brewery, we need a funky program, and they never made anything really that great. It was good, not great. And eventually they lost interest, probably because as Ron said, they're really difficult beers to make. These weren't quick sours. These were long aged. And so, it would be great to see the volume where it was, 10 years ago or whenever. But I also, know that, at least where we're at, we just had to have a bit of a course correction on our expectations of what funky beer could be. And, it might be that we're maybe not making that much more than Paul or Ron, or I don't know, but I do know that, we would love to sell more. We're ready to, but we're also not going to force it either, because I don't think this is a style that you can just force down the consumer's throat. I think it's a hand sell. And so getting people to the brewery, and, now after looking up Paul's website, I'm anxious to take that flight from Santa Rosa to Bend that just started. And
oh, that's right, we got a direct now, don't we?
Yes, we do.
Right on. No excuses for us anymore.
No.
Well, I was also thinking
you guys should come out to Hilo too, because every day, I mean, just because maybe me, or maybe because the consumer is ready, we have folks in here all the time asking for sour beer. So if you guys want to come out, we collaborate on some sour projects. That would be great. And you'd get to be in Hawaii, which isn't that bad.
No,
that doesn't sound bad at all.
Not at all. What were you going to say, Paul?
Oh, I think the other interesting thing to me is we see people all the time in our tasting room who come in who still don't know what these beers, don't even know these beers exist. Not just my beers, but just you say wild, you say sour, you say spontaneous, and they're like, what? No, I've never heard of that. And it's like, okay. So, that's, we did this little tree beer festival a few months ago. Well, I guess it's more than a few months ago now. A couple interesting things came out of that. We sold out of the tickets, both sessions we sold out completely. But people's drinking habits were way low. Everybody that we talked to had a great time, but like people were not drinking the volumes that we kind of anticipated. So I think that's kind of this big industry thing. But the other thing was that how many people were excited. It was like back for me, I can say in my old days, it was like being back in 2012 again, saying, hey, I'm making beer out of a tree. And, kind of thinking, at this point, wow, like we made a little bit of a splash and all that kind of stuff. You think that people coming to our tree beer festival would kind of have some knowledge about this general beer style, these wild beers. And I was just astonished how many people had no clue, And so I kind of go to this thing. I think social media is not doing us a very big favor here, because I think it really silos and actually keeps some of these algorithms, I think, are so tricky, right? It's like
prevent discovery.
I think the social media is part of this.
Yeah. It's interesting that it would be used to, everyone uses it to learn about things, but it'd be funny or interesting that it would be
you're on
siloing.
TikTok for educational purposes.
Yes, it asks me sometimes. Do you consider this entertaining or educational?
You're like, well, that dance was sick, and I'm learning it now.
Yeah.
So I can now hit the grizzy.
Yeah, exactly. You saw that one too.
Yeah.
Okay.
You hitting the grizzy? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you were the like.
I did not like it. No.
Oh no, someone did.
What the hell are you talking about?
I'm not even sure. I'm too old for what I'm talking about.
Well, we are. It's about that time, and I want to be considerate of everyone's time, except for you, John. You can stick around after they all get off. You have nowhere to go. But
You've got nowhere to go. Rude.
Yes. Well, I've known John long enough that I can be rude.
They have
with
Alvin
him.
King at the bar. I'll be fine.
Yeah, it's fine. But I wanted to thank all of you guys for coming on. It's been amazing to have you all in one virtual place. And I wanted to see, is there anything that you guys would like to say before we head on out for the night?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick here. I think, if we're talking about this industry and change and what's going on, it's like, I think just looking at this panel, I'm going to just shout out to all the female brewers out there and say, hey, go out there and do something totally different, and feel free to save this wild beer program for us.
It's on you, Avery. Go get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Avery's doing a bang up job.
Yeah,
She's doing
I mean,
fine.
right. I don't really know how to respond to that, but like there's Avery, there's Tanya, there's Lauren, there's like so many female brewers that are doing this sour
Erica.
stuff. So
Oh yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I think it can be reinvented, and it would be really awesome if it included more people.
Absolutely. I mean, my company is definitely very diverse. So we absolutely do that. But what I would say is, in response to your social media thing, is like we can promote this stuff and we can do social media, and I think that it can be done well. We just need to have people do it that do it right. And my daughter-in-law is a genius at it, so she does it. What we need is more, a lot of things, more inclusivity, more diversity, and also you were saying that social media ruins sour beer. I don't think it ruins sour beer. I just think that some of the people that made bad sour beer ruin sour beer, or wild beer, or natural beer, or whatever we're going to call it next week. It doesn't matter to me. The thing is that matters to me is that I'm an artist, and I make liquid stuff that contains alcohol, and I don't care what you call it, but if you enjoy it, that's what I want. So that's where I am, and I like to help people. So, John, hit me up if you need anything, or if you want to come to Hawaii, but you're probably going to need some flip-flops, not the fry boots. Just saying.
I need flip flops. I don't have those.
You can sail there.
It's not a very Chicago item, to be honest. The flip-flop.
You can sail from Chicago to Hawaii, can't you?
I'm not sure that's true.
You got to go around the horn.
That's a long ways.
You got to go out through the Erie
I believe in
Canal,
him. I believe in him.
through the Panama.
Vinny, anything you want to say?
If it was me,
Yeah.
I'll finish with just I'll echo what I said before, that I think those of us that are doing this now are doing it for the right reason. And I think yes, we lost some great players, but a lot of the ones that were making mid-range versions aren't in the game anymore, and that's okay. There's actually a lot of bad hazy IPA out there, and there's a lot of great hazy IPA, and hopefully the bad stuff falls by the wayside and doesn't ruin it. But these are hand sold beers, and it can be done via social media. It can be done in person. We used to do a funky tour pre-COVID, and we haven't brought it back yet, but I would love to at some point, just for those people that are into it. But, when you take our guided tour, you end walking through the hallway with the funky brewery looking down on it, and you end at our cool ship, and you drink funky wild beer, and, This is just a style that it's like a one person at a time hand sell, and it's just something we need to remember as an industry. And you can still distribute it and whatnot, but the average person probably doesn't know it. So you got to figure out ways, and we need to figure out ways to hand sell it. But we also don't need to make 10,000 barrels of it either.
Right.
I'm going to just jump on what Vinnie said as my closing comments, which is these are niche products. I think where the industry kind of erred is trying to grow them up into giant production scales. The same way as Vinnie does, I end all of our tours in our foeder room, and there's something about the magic of walking in that room and seeing all the foeders, and people are just awestruck, and they're amazed. You pour a little something out of the sample port, and they're turned on in a way that you cannot create in an industrialized process. I think that's a beautiful thing. During the 70s, you'll talk to Jean Roy and other Belgian producers. Armand unfortunately passed away, but during the 70s, they were in a similar downtrend, much worse than we are now. And things came back after that. I have faith that these beers are poetry, these beers are artistry, and there'll always be a segment of the drinking public which will find them interesting, unique, and engaging. And I just think still find that audience and pitch to them, not trying to make it.
Well said, John.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, John, that's right.
Good way to end the show.
Yeah, I know.
That's my one good thing to say for the day. Sorry.
I'm gonna write. I'm gonna make sure. I gotta write all that down when this is posted.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Both of your guys' comments, perfect. And that's what's great about our industry, and especially the sour beer in general. We started the conversation about collaboration because there's no real thing, and then we end it with all of us saying, "Oh my gosh, your comments were amazing."
Yeah.
It's just
Here's to the resurgence.
Yeah.
It's encapsulation
Natural
of the
beer
whole
2.0.
thing. 2.3, John. 2.3.
2.3, sorry.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thanks. We have to give thanks to WLPN, to the Fade Master Surge for helping to set this up. Thanks to our guests, John, Paul, Ron, and Vinnie. Thank you guys so much.
Band.
Yeah, for coming on, and for everyone out there listening, thank you as always, and we will see you next week. So long.
Thanks, you guys. Nice hanging out.
Thank you.
To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted.